The night my mother slid the manila envelope across the dinner table, I knew before I opened it. I'd known for about 11 months, actually. I just hadn't said anything yet. It was their 35th anniversary. Westcott House on Beacon Hill. The kind of restaurant where the maitre d' calls you by your last name and the bread basket comes with 3 different butters. My father had reserved the private dining room on the 2nd floor, the one with the bay window that looks out over the common. There were 22 of us at the table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my father's law school roommate, who flew in from Charleston, the priest who married them in 1990. My older sister sat at the head of the table next to my mother, wearing the emerald earrings my grandmother had left to me in her will. My grandmother had been dead for 14 months by then. I'd already poured myself a second glass of Pinot when my father stood up and clinked his fork against the rim of his water glass. He's a small man, my father, 5'7" on a generous day, but he's spent 40 years convincing courtrooms and clients and his own family that he is enormous. He has this way of pausing before he speaks. Like every word is a verdict you've been waiting to hear. "We have an announcement," he said, looking at my mother, who beamed up at him like she was 19 again. "As you all know, this year marks 35 years since the best decision I ever made." Polite laughter. "And to celebrate, your mother and I are taking the entire family to Lake Como for 2 weeks this June. The whole thing. Villa rental, private boat tours, a cooking class at a Michelin-starred trattoria. Just us. All of us." The room went up like fireworks. My Aunt Marlena actually shrieked. My cousin's husband, who teaches public school in Worcester and once told me he'd never been east of Albany, started crying. My sister was already Googling something on her phone. Probably the villa. I waited. I drank my wine. I waited. When the noise died down, I leaned forward and smiled at my father the way I'd been practicing in the mirror for 2 months. "What's my flight number, Dad? I want to put it in my calendar." He looked at me. Really looked at me, in that flat, appraising way he has, like he was reading a deposition. And then he laughed. Not a kind laugh. The laugh he uses on opposing counsel. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, "you don't need a flight number. You're not coming." The silence that came down over the table was not the embarrassed kind. It was the satisfied kind. Like everyone had been waiting for this moment, and now it was finally here. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice was level. I was proud of that. "Someone has to stay home and watch your sister's house. The boys have summer camp drop-offs. The dogs need walking. And frankly, we need someone responsible on the ground in case anything happens with the Newton property." He took a sip of his Cabernet. "You don't have a real job to worry about. You can spare the time. I'm a litigation associate at Tarrant Whitfield, Dad. You're a second year. You shuffle paper. They won't miss you." My mother, sitting 2 seats down, had her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her knuckles were the color of old piano keys. She wouldn't look at me. She was looking at the centerpiece, a low arrangement of ranunculus and pale green hellebore that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. My sister Rebecca laid her phone face down on the table. "Don't make this weird, Caroline. It's not personal. You don't have kids. You don't have a husband. You're the only one with flexibility." "I have flexibility," I said, "because I don't have what you have. So now I'm being punished for it." "Punished?" My father set his glass down. "Caroline, we are giving you a free place to live for 2 weeks. You should be grateful. Some people would kill for an opportunity like this. And honestly, after everything we'd done for you, the law school tuition, the bar prep course, the car, you owe this family more than you've given. 2 weeks of dog walking is the least you can do." That's when my mother slid the envelope across the table. I opened it because I couldn't think of what else to do. Inside was a printed itinerary. 3 pages, single-spaced. Feeding times for my sister's golden retriever and her labradoodle. Medication schedule for the older dog, who had a heart condition. School pickup logistics for my nephews, ages 6 and 9, who would apparently be staying with me in my 1-bedroom apartment in Cambridge for the entire 2nd week because my sister hadn't been able to find a camp spot for them, the poleman's number, the lawn service, the cleaning lady, who came on Tuesdays and had to be paid in cash from an envelope in the upstairs hall closet. There was a sticky note on the last page in my mother's looping handwriting. Don't forget Felix's eye drops. Twice a day. Both eyes. Felix was the dying one. I folded the itinerary in half. I folded it again. I put it in my purse. I took a slow drink of wine. And I smiled. Of course, I said. I'd love to help. Whatever the family needs. My sister beamed. My father did the small, satisfied nod he does when a witness gives him exactly the answer he was leading them toward. My mother finally met my eyes, and for 1 second I saw something there. Not regret exactly, more like a question. Like she was asking whether I'd really roll over this easy. Reader, I had not rolled over. I had been standing up for 11 months. They just hadn't noticed. Let me back up. My name is Caroline. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, in a house that had a name, Hollyfield, carved into the stone gatepost. My father is a senior partner at one of those Boston law firms that has 6 names on the letterhead and 3 private elevators. My mother sits on the board of the New England Conservatory and the Friends of the Public Garden. We had a Christmas card photo every year, all 4 of us in matching cream sweaters, taken by a man who came to the house. Hollyfield had a tennis court that nobody used and a saltwater pool that my mother kept heated to 82 degrees year-round because she said the cold made her bones ache. Rebecca is 6 years older than me and has been, for as long as I can remember, the answer to every question. Did I get straight A's? Rebecca got straight A's and was captain of the lacrosse team. Did I get into Cornell? Rebecca went to Yale. I went to law school because she went to law school. Except she went to Harvard and I went to BC, and at the dinner where I announced my acceptance, my father looked at my mother and said, "Well, BC's a fine school," in the same voice he used to compliment people's casseroles at funerals. Here's the thing nobody outside our family understood. My parents weren't cruel. They were worse than cruel. They were disappointed. Every interaction was an audition I'd already failed. Rebecca married a hedge fund manager named Thomas at the Boston Harbor Hotel. I had a long-term boyfriend in law school who proposed at a Red Sox game, and when I called my mother, she sighed and said, "Oh, honey, at Fenway? That's so him." We broke up 4 months later. I'm not sure that wasn't part of the reason. The grandmother I mentioned, my mother's mother, was a woman named Eleonora, who was, as far as I could tell, the only person in my whole family who actually saw me. She lived in a stone cottage in the Berkshires with 2 cats and 1,000 books. She drank gin out of a teacup at 3 p.m. She called my father to his face, "That pompous little man." When I was 17 and crying in her kitchen because my mother had told me I was too heavy for my prom dress, my grandmother put a hand on my cheek and said, "Caroline, sweet girl. They're very small people. Try not to let them make you small too." She died on a Wednesday in March. Heart attack, fast. I was at my desk at the firm when my mother called. I left work, drove 4 hours to the Berkshires, sat in my grandmother's kitchen, and ate cold leftover lasagna out of the pan, because nobody had thought to put it away. 3 weeks later, the reading of the will. My grandmother left her cottage and most of her cash assets to my mother. Some jewelry to Rebecca, and to me, she left what the attorney called a qualified personal residence trust, containing $4.1 million, established in 2008, with my mother as trustee until I turned 30, and with very specific language about how the funds were to be used, my education, my first home, my professional development. The will was specific. The trust documents were specific. My grandmother had told me about it twice, both times after a second teacup of gin. "When I'm gone, sweet girl, you'll have what you need. Don't let your mother near it. She'll find a reason." I had nodded the way you nod when an old woman tells you something important. I hadn't really listened. 11 months ago, I tried to use the trust to pay off the rest of my law school loans. I was at the firm by then, billing hours, doing okay, but the loans were a millstone. I asked my mother, as trustee, to authorize the distribution. The trust language clearly permitted it. Education was the first listed purpose. She told me there was a complication. She told me my grandmother had verbally amended her wishes in the weeks before her death. She told me there had been expenses related to settling the estate that had drawn down the principal. She told me that what was left after taxes and fees and Rebecca's portion was about $300,000, and that she didn't think it was prudent to distribute it for loans when it could be preserved for my future. I'm a lawyer. Not a great one, yet, but a lawyer. I asked for an accounting. She said she'd get it to me. 3 weeks passed. I asked again. She said she'd ask my father to find time to put it together. My father, who was not the trustee, who had no formal role. I let it go for a week. Then I went down to the firm's records department on a Saturday and pulled every public filing I could find on a Westlaw deep dive about my grandmother's estate. I had a college friend who'd gone into forensic accounting reach out informally to a contact at the bank that held the trust. What I found, slowly, over months, was this. My mother, as trustee, had been making withdrawals from the trust since 6 weeks after my grandmother's death. Wire transfers to an account at a different bank, in her own name. Some had been styled as trustee fees, which were not authorized by the trust document. Others were straight up unexplained. Total, about $2.3 million. Rebecca's portion had gone toward the down payment on her Newton house, the one I was about to be left to house us at. My father, who was not the trustee, had received a wire of $400,000, labeled consulting. There was no consulting agreement. There were no services rendered. There was just a wire. I had screenshots. I had bank records I'd obtained legally through the trust beneficiary disclosure provisions. I had a chronology in a spreadsheet on a laptop that lived in the safe deposit box at a Cambridge savings branch, not at the bank that held the trust. I had also, 3 months before the anniversary dinner, quietly retained an attorney from a firm in Providence. A woman named Ms. Vance, who had built her career on trust litigation and who, when I first walked into her office and laid out what I had, looked across her desk at me and said, "Sweetheart, they have no idea what's coming, do they?" They did not. So when my father told me in front of 22 people that I was staying home to walk the dogs, what he didn't know was that I had already filed a petition for an emergency accounting in Suffolk County Probate Court. The petition was sealed pending service. The service was scheduled, by my attorney's careful arrangement, for the day my parents were due to fly out of Logan. I drove home from the anniversary dinner with my hands at 10 and 2, the radio off. When I got back to my apartment, I put the itinerary on my kitchen counter, opened a bottle of seltzer, and called Ms. Vance. It was 9:45 at night. She picked up on the second ring. "They did the Lake Como thing," I said. "It went exactly how you said it would." "And you?" I smiled. I took the binder. "Good girl, now we wait." For the next 3 weeks, I was the daughter they wanted. I showed up at my sister's house in Newton on the appointed Saturday to do a walkthrough of the dog's routine. I took notes. I asked about Felix's medication. I let my sister condescend to me about how to operate the espresso machine. I made small talk with my mother about the linen closet and which guest room I should use if my nephews wanted me to stay over. I asked my father, 3 days before they were scheduled to leave, whether he wanted me to forward any mail. He told me to leave it on the credenza in his study. The night before they flew out, my mother sent me a text. "Sweetheart, thank you so much for stepping up. We know you'll do a wonderful job." "Mom," I screenshotted it. I sent it to Ms. Vance. She wrote back, "Beautiful." That's evidence of ongoing reliance. The morning of June 8th, I called in sick to the firm. I drove to my sister's house in Newton. The lockbox code was in my purse. The dogs greeted me at the door, all wagging tails and stupid trust. I let them out into the backyard. I fed them. I gave Felix his eye drops. Then, I sat down at my sister's kitchen island with my laptop and waited. At 10:47 a.m., Ms. Vance called. "They've been served," she said. "All 3 of them. At the Delta counter at Terminal A, there's an automatic temporary restraining order in place on every account named in the petition, including the trust, the Newton house, and your father's personal investment portfolio. They cannot move money. They cannot board the plane internationally with any of those instruments. They have a hearing in 12 days. I would suggest you not answer your phone." I did not answer my phone. It rang 23 times in the next 4 hours. My mother left voicemails. 3 of them. The first was bewildered. The second was furious. The third was crying. My father left one. It was 4 seconds long. Call me back. Now. Rebecca called from her cell phone, then from Thomas's phone, then from an unknown number that turned out to be a payphone at Logan, of all things. Who knew there were still payphones at Logan? At 4:12 p.m., my Aunt Marlena called. I answered. Caroline, sweetheart, what is happening? Your father is screaming. Your mother is in the bathroom. They're saying you did something. Are you okay? I'm fine, Aunt Marlena. What did you do? I filed a petition for an accounting of Grandma's trust. The line was quiet for a long time. Then my aunt, who had been at the dinner, who had cried into her napkin when my father announced Lake Como, said, Oh, Caroline. Oh, honey. About time. I did not go to my sister's house again. I did not walk the dogs. I had, 3 days earlier, arranged for a bonded pet care company in Newton to take over all dog-related responsibilities, paid in advance from my own bank account. I had also arranged for my nephews, who were not in fact coming to my apartment, to be picked up from camp by my sister's mother-in-law, a kind woman named Patrice, who, when I called to explain the situation, said only, I always wondered when this was going to happen. By Tuesday, my parents and Rebecca had retained counsel. By Friday, the temporary restraining order had been continued. The forensic accountant Ms. Vance had reconstructed the trust activity, going back to the date of my grandmother's death. The total in unauthorized withdrawals was $2.7 million. There were also irregularities in my father's law firm partnership distributions that, when traced back, suggested he had been moving money through the trust to avoid certain partnership accounting requirements. That part was not even my case. That part was going to be the Massachusetts Bar's case eventually. 3 weeks after the hearing, my mother was removed as trustee. I was named successor trustee, with an independent co-trustee for oversight. The court ordered restitution of the full amount, with interest plus attorney's fees, plus statutory damages under the Massachusetts Trust Statute. The Newton House, which had been purchased with trust funds, was placed under a constructive trust and would have to be sold, with proceeds returning to the corpus. My father resigned from his firm in October. He did not jump, he was pushed, very quietly, in the way that big firms push senior partners they no longer want to be associated with. He kept his license, but is now what is politely called of counsel, at a much smaller firm in Providence, where, I have been told, his office does not have a window. My mother and father separated in December. She moved into Hollyfield alone. He moved into a condo in the South End. The divorce was filed in February. My mother's name came off the conservatory board in March. The Friends of the Public Garden announced a new vice chair in April. Rebecca and Thomas sold the Newton House in May, at a loss, after the constructive trust was lifted following partial restitution. Thomas, I am told, did not take any of this well. He had not known. He had genuinely believed that the down payment came from his in-laws as a gift. There is a separate civil action pending between Rebecca and Thomas now. I do not follow it closely. Felix Philap died in late August, peacefully, at his actual home with the bonded pet sitter who had become quite attached to him. I cried more than I expected to. He had not deserved any of us. I am 30 now. The trust, fully restored, sits in an account I monitor with my co-trustee. I used the first authorized distribution in September to pay off the rest of my law school loans. The second distribution went toward a down payment on a small condo in Somerville, with a window that gets the morning light. I bought a single rocking chair and put it by the window. Sometimes I drink tea in it and think about my grandmother. I made partner track at my firm last month. Miss Permins. Vance and I have lunch every 6 weeks. She told me, the last time we met, that she had referred 2 other clients to me, women in similar situations. You have a knack, she said. Or maybe you just understand. My mother sent me a Christmas card this year. It came to my old apartment and was forwarded. The card was a watercolor of a robin on a snowy branch. Inside, in her loopy handwriting, she had written, Caroline. I hope you can find it in your heart, Mom. I have not yet found it in my heart, Mom. I have not yet found it in my heart. I'm not sure I'm going to, My grandmother told me once, in her kitchen with the cats and the gin, that forgiveness is for people who ask for it honestly. My mother has not asked. She has only mourned what she lost. There is a difference. The morning of my parents' anniversary dinner, before I drove to Westcott House, I went to my safe deposit box at Cambridge Savings. I opened it. I looked at the spreadsheet, the screenshots, the affidavit Ms. Vance had drafted. I closed the box. I drove to the restaurant, in the kind of dress my mother would have called trying. She thought she was sliding an envelope toward me to put me in my place. She did not know that I had already, very quietly, taken my place. The one my grandmother had set for me. The one nobody could give me or take away, because it had been mine all along. I just had to be patient enough to claim it. I've thought a lot, in the years since the airport, about why none of them saw it coming. My father is a litigator. My mother spent her whole adult life on boards, running rooms, reading people. Rebecca went to Harvard Law. They were not stupid people. They were just people who had decided, very early, that I was not worth watching closely. And once you stop watching someone, you stop seeing them. That was their mistake, and it was mine to use. I don't think what happened to my parents was karma in some cosmic sense. I don't believe in a ledger somewhere keeping score. I think it was something simpler and harder. They made choices. Year after year, dinner after dinner. They chose to take more than they gave. To lie when honesty would have cost them something. To use a grandmother's love for me as a piggy bank for a Newton mortgage. Those choices accumulated. The trust withdrawals were not the cause. They were the proof. The cause was 1,000 small decisions to put themselves first, and to assume that the quiet daughter at the end of the table would absorb it forever. My grandmother, Eleonora, told me once that small people will always make you smaller if you let them, and the only protection is to keep growing in directions they can't follow. I didn't understand it at the time. I do now. While my father was learning to be feared in courtrooms, I was learning trust law. While my mother was practicing her seating charts, I was teaching myself forensic accounting on weekends. They had no idea I was becoming someone they couldn't bully, because they had stopped looking. If there's anything I'd want a younger version of me to know, it's this. Patience is not weakness. Walking away is not always the answer. Sometimes the right answer is to stay in the room, smile when you have to, and do the careful, unglamorous work of telling the truth in a way that finally gets heard. That takes character. It also takes a spine. And it takes a brain you've actually trained. Don't be afraid to be the quiet one. The quiet one is often the only one paying attention. Don't waste your anger on noise. Save it for evidence. And don't ever convince yourself that people who hurt you are also people you owe an explanation. You don't. You owe yourself a life they can't reach. I drink tea in my grandmother's chair now. I watch the morning light come through my own window, in a home I bought with money she made sure was mine. Sometimes I think about the woman my mother could have been if she had loved her daughters instead of comparing them. That's the saddest part of all of this. She had a chance to be Eleonora to someone. She chose to be small instead, and small people get what they build.